I am Catherine O'Brien. I'm a relationship psychotherapist at happywithbaby.com and the author of Happy with Baby, Essential Relationship Advice When Partners Become Parents. And today I am so excited. I've been looking forward to this for months now, to be here with Kimberly Didrikson, CEO and founder of Learning Motherhood. And she's going to be giving us some advice and answering some questions about parental leave. So thank you so much for being here, Kimberly.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here and really excited to be in your community today.
Yeah, so tell us how you got into deciding you wanted to help people in regards to parental leave.
So it really happened after I had my first son. So my first experience in this whole new world of navigating parenthood and motherhood and career and the challenges that came with it. So I felt pretty prepared to go on parental leave. I felt completely unprepared to go back to work. And yes. I looked to the left and the right and up and down and said, okay, where's the support for women returning back to a career that are mothers and dads that are going through this? And I saw literally nothing. So I have 3 kids. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And I was struggling deeply. So I went through postpartum depression and anxiety, and ultimately a lot of it stemmed from this complete disconnect from the identity of who I was prior to baby to who I was after baby, and how do I connect that back to my career. And there was no framework to kind of navigate this transition. And so I wanted to be around others that were going through this. And when I asked for advice, it really was, you just power through. And I just thought, man, there's gotta be a better way than just power
what does that mean,
through.
Power through?
Yeah. So that is really the infancy of learning motherhood. So I kind of looked at the topics that are really hard for families when returning back to work. And that includes things like childcare, workplace communication, understanding your parental leave rights, understanding how to navigate routines and schedules, relationships, which I know you're very familiar with, but it has so many changes from when you become a parent, and then it goes through another change when you return back to work. And so I felt pretty passionate about that. There needs to be a support for working parents, but it has to look different. I didn't want it to have just a sterile feel. I wanted it to have that feeling that, so many mothers groups have for those that are able to do things during the week, which are understanding your sleep needs, understanding how to navigate relationships, lactation support, all these things that are so crucial to the discussion. And that was how we kind of came to where we are now, and supporting parents through the transition of a birth of a family and returning back to work after parental leave.
Yeah. So you recently launched your new program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a major pivot, as so many companies did, from
with the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. So we worked really hard last year to launch our online platform so we can reach you wherever you are, whether you're on the East Coast, in the Midwest, on the West Coast. We have the availability for you to tap into this community of moms going through exactly the same thing you are at the exact same time, and or are further along in their journey, whether they've been back at work for some time and had their second child. All of these things just help you feel supported. And through that, you have accessibility to the community, but our online course. And it's essentially a framework. And even the word course is hard for me because it also sounds like I was saying, so sterile. The importance of that course was really to bring the humanization of what this experience is. So providing resources that really kind of go through exactly the stages that you experience through returning back to work, but with a framework that helps you feel like you can thrive and feel confident on returning in a way that's more on your terms versus somebody else's.
Yeah, I love that because I know, I mean, that is one of, okay, so I run like a mom support group, and that is always one of the big things that comes in. At first, it's the challenges of just, you know, bringing baby home and issues with sleep and getting used to like feeding and routine and stuff with their partners and stuff. And then it becomes this anxiety of, okay, now I'm going to be going back to work. I'm anxious about leaving the baby, or, you know, how is it going to be, like all these things. And then I feel like we spend so many weeks talking about that as well. And so I love that you have put it all into this like program to really like support, you know, because that's what we need. We need that support. We need that encouragement. We need to know how to find the resources, because it's hard to navigate all that on our own.
Yeah, exactly. And that was another thing. So we actually include a whole section on childcare, because the anxiety about childcare is so real and so prevalent, especially in that infancy stage of this transition. And it's also just like you're going through the postpartum period. And the emotions are real, and they should be real, right?
Right.
They're there for a reason, and we want to honor them. I think ultimately the idea of the course, the virtual course, was really to provide a framework that you could customize. I like to call it's a suitcase of options.
Yes.
So it works when you pick the clothing you want to put in the suitcase. And
I love that. Yeah.
You know, it works for what it works for your family, because every family is different, whether you're a dual income family, a single income family, or you're going through this process for the first time in a different frame. So that is the hugest piece for me, is to make it really inclusive for everyone. And that's why we include a lot of different experts, including yourself.
Which I'm excited about. Yes.
Yeah. And things that, you know, I'm not as knowledgeable about. You know, I have my own experiences, but I don't want to just derive on my own experience. I want to have a space where we have an expert come in that is exposed to so many other experiences. So the lactation consultants, the nutritionists, like all those things are really, it's a part of that return to work. And yet, working families really were missing that option.
What would you say, like I know I have some parents in here getting ready to go back to work now, even, or not sure what they want to do. And then there's some pregnant people as well. Do you have tips? Like, what would you suggest for people to start like thinking about or gearing up for if they're, you know, going to be going out on paternity leave, maternal maternity leave, and then maybe like if they're getting ready to go back, like what would be your suggestions?
So I have a couple, and so I just want to start with 2 tips. There's so many intricacies when it comes to this process, and I like to say that because if it feels hard, there's a reason. It's hard for a reason, you know, and there's a lot of support in different areas, and this one is just lacking. So here's what I would say. First, if you are pregnant, before you tell your boss or your employer that you are pregnant, reviewing your parental leave policy within your organization, and also understanding what is available to you at the state and federal level is huge. So there are some states, including the state we reside in California, that have robust programs to support this transition. And it's so important to understand that. Most parents will look at an organization to give you all the information. So they'll say, okay, so what are my rights? What do I have accessibility to based on the organization? Typically, it kind of stops there. It's up to you to look to see what's available to you at a state level. And a lot of times what happens is you only kind of see to what your company offers.
Right.
California, for example, they have a really great program that allows several people across the state to qualify to take the last month off for pregnancy. And it's kind of a use it or lose it. So if you don't take those 4 weeks off, you don't get to carry them over after you have a baby. It's always before the baby arrives, these 4 weeks. And you get paid for them. So you have to look into if you're qualified, and we have resources to kind of direct you to places where you can find this information out. But before you go into telling your boss or your company, it's good to know this so that you come in more confident in that discussion. And that kind of leads me to the next thing, which is when you're telling your boss, staff, HR about pregnancy, do not commit to a time frame that you'll be on parental leave. And so, you know, you're probably early on in your stage of pregnancy, or you've already told your employer that you're pregnant, but you haven't hit like the third trimester. You're not there yet. But you don't know how things are going to go, right?
Right. No, we never do.
Right?
Yes.
So give yourself the grace and don't put that expectation on yourself about when you're going to return ahead of time. You don't have to validate that. Instead, talk about your commitment to the organization. Simply kind of stating your contribution to the organization is important, and you're committed to the position, and you will continue to be during your pregnancy and after baby. I would love to give you exactly a view into the future of how my pregnancy and delivery are going to go, but I don't know. I don't know the answer. So I will keep you involved, but I can tell you this. And oftentimes that's all they need to hear, right? And you just don't want to create more anxiety for you because you overpromise when you actually don't know the outcome yet.
Right. Like we don't know what's going to happen. And so I always ask people what is your plan? And not because I think that you need to commit to it, but I just want to know, so I know how to support you, what you think you want to do, because what you might end up doing is completely different down the road.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So speaking of that, why I was so shocked by the experience of returning after I had my baby and returning back to work was I had this vision when I was pregnant. I'm just going to put my baby on my hip. We're going to have this amazing family. I'm going to drop him off at daycare, and I'm just going to go back and everything's the same. I just have this amazing human with me.
Yeah. They just fit right into everything.
And I was so shocked in a way that, made me better as a human, but also it was an incredibly challenging space to be in because I had a vision of what I thought it was going to be. And so if I had gone into my employer and said, I'm going to be back in 6 weeks, there's no way I would have been able to commit to that.
Right.
And because I knew my rights and I knew what my company offered and I knew what the state offered, I knew that I had more time than that. And I wasn't going to commit to something that I wasn't ready for.
Good. That's awesome. Yeah. Isn't it amazing? I mean, how I got into doing the work that I do was after, our first child too. And I'm how was I not prepared for really what it was going to look like afterwards, Yeah.
So. Yeah. And I think there's a piece to this where we ever fully prepared for how our emotions are going to be?
No.
Right?
Absolutely not. There's no way, right?
Yeah. But I'm glad, when you kind of look at these particular 2 tips, it's giving you the grace to not know the answer. And I think that's the huge piece is just you don't have to have the answers. And that's okay. That's okay. And that's an introduction to parenthood right there.
Right. I was just thinking that as you were saying that. I'm like, well, welcome to parenthood, because you don't know. And we don't know. And there's so many options and choices, and every family looks different. And like you were mentioning before, like the dynamics is different. And whether we have, dual income or single income or, whatever, it's going to look different. Like the type of schooling, the type of childcare that you want. Everybody has different values or priorities or things that are important to them. So it's like there are so many options, and it's figuring out what the options are and then being comfortable with them for your family,
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we do in our Return to Work series, is kind of help you through that decision making. And to speak about childcare is really, there's a financial component to that. So understanding, on a financial perspective, okay, what's my ideal world and what's my reality, and then working from what you want in your ideal world and how can you infuse as much as you possibly can on a financial reality standpoint. And then, you asked about returning back to work. So for those that are returning back to work, there's so many key components to this, but two really major ones that I think really eliminate a little bit of the anxiety, also help with the transition, is to schedule your return to date back to work midweek.
I love so much that you said, when you sent me that, I'm like, yes, that is so perfect in so many ways, but I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah. Don't set yourself up to, you're right into the scenario where you're working 5 days in a row after you've been on parental leave, and allow yourself the opportunity for a successful transition. And if you can't work out some sort of transitional schedule, at least get that first week in a place where you can just ease yourself into it. So I like to say Wednesday through Friday, set it up where you're returning one of those days later in the week to help support that transition. The next one that I'll share is to start childcare a couple weeks before you return, on a light schedule, obviously, because you're trying to soak up as much time as you can with the baby. But it's such a crucial piece to this discussion, because when you get to the day that you're returning back to work, the anxiety of leaving that day will be a lot less if that introduction has already happened, whether it's daycare or a nanny. Like, either way, having that experience ahead of time, having your baby get used to it, but ultimately having you, and if you have a partner, get used to it, that is going to be really helpful in terms of navigating those first couple weeks back at work.
Yeah, I've known people that have done that, and I just think it makes it so much easier, like that transition. If we can do things a little bit at a time, I think it makes everything so much easier, and just supporting the emotions around it all too.
Yeah, and it helps you kind of understand, okay, what will the flow feel like? If one thing's for sure that it will help you kind of relate to is being able to navigate the emotional piece of being disconnected for a certain amount of time. And that is something on the first day that can feel like, really, oh my gosh, I've been gone for 7-8 hours or whatever length of time it is. And so you kind of start like baby steps, kind of literally, kind of going through that process of giving yourself the energy and space to have those emotions and separate that from when you return full-time back to work. You're having those emotions ahead of time, so you kind of know how to navigate them a little bit better. And, one of the things that you can kind of look forward to is typically at work, you're fairly distracted.
Yes.
You're busy.
Yes.
So know that too, that, it'll look different when you're actually back and you're in the busyness of work. It will actually be a nice distraction from some of what you're experiencing with being away from your baby, and knowing that on the positive side, you found a great place to go. You know that it'll be okay. And you've dealt with a little bit of the emotional piece that comes with that transition.
Right. Yeah. And I always like to tell people, it's like, and you can change your mind on things too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because there are so many choices. I feel like we think that we've made a choice and that's like we're stuck in it and we can't end up changing our minds, and that you can, and figuring out something else, because like you mentioned, there are so many choices and options out there. And so like, because I feel like sometimes, you know, parents will tell me like they feel like, oh gosh, I made this choice and this is the end all be all, and it, you know, if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, because you're not comfortable, because the baby's not comfortable, whatever the things are, it's like there are going to be other options and choices that you can make too.
It is a big decision, right? So it's like the biggest decision you're making outside of, you know, the healthiness of your baby and picking your pediatrician and where you had your baby and all those things. It's a really big decision for so many families. And so it can feel like I failed because I didn't pick the right one. But ultimately, that's not it. You're just that much closer to finding the perfect spot for you. And guess what? Like, personalities change, things change, and you might change again. But I think there's something to be said about seasons. And so that season might be at this one childcare facility or with this one childcare provider. And then all of a sudden it's somewhere else because that's a better fit because of a new season in life. So I like that. I like that description. You don't know what kind of personality your kid is going to have either, and what they'll like and what they'll, you know, what they'll want to be involved in and stuff. So yeah, you think you're figuring it out. You think you know, but I think we give so much weight in terms of pressure on our shoulders on if we make a mistake here.
Yes.
And, you know, obviously there are reasons why that's there. You're protecting your child. You want to make sure they're safe. And those are all very valid, important reasons. And then you go to the second layer of reasons, which have to do with, like, you know, the facility and the person and some of the other things that obviously are not at the top list of safety. Safety is the first, and then you get down to the next list, and it's like, what's going to jive for you? What's going to jive for your child? And that is where that could change. And that is okay. And I actually did go through that. So I picked a place before I went on parental leave. So I picked a place for our childcare provider while I was pregnant. And then after I had my child, I went and checked it out. I want to say 6 weeks after we had him. And I went there and I said, no way. I left crying. I said, I can't do it. And there was nothing wrong with the place. It was still amazing as it was before. I had just changed. Like, I had a different thought of what I wanted to look like. And so we were back to the drawing board. And that felt like a little challenging. We lost a deposit. We did all these things. But ultimately, you know, you have to feel good. And that's the idea. Like, you need to feel relaxed and good about the decision. And it's okay to trust that instinct and go, no, maybe that's not the right place anymore.
Yeah. I'm so glad you shared that description. We had neighbors that same thing happened. They went to take their child to daycare for the first time. And next thing I know, they're coming back again. I'm like, what happened? And she's like, I couldn't leave my baby. And they had to, you know, reassess and ended up, you know, finding another option. And she's like, it wasn't that there was anything wrong with it. It was just something just didn't feel right. And I think that happens more often than people talk about, and it is figuring out like what feels good to you too. So I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. I'm so excited about the program that you have to offer, because I think it's so valuable, and I'm excited to be a part of it too. Do you have any like final thoughts or anything that you would share with new parents or parents in general?
I would say, listen, like, it has been a really challenging time, right? Like, there's been so many things that you probably never anticipated would be your story of this experience, bringing in a new child into your family. And while it's not exactly the way that you wanted to, there is support to help you kind of still thrive and enjoy this period of time, and having new life in your family and supporting it in a way that's going to work for you. And that is why, you know, it's so crucial to have, you know, offerings like you offer and what Learning Motherhood offers, because it's still like, there's still a way to thrive, even though it feels like the weight of the world has just completely taken away, you know, what you thought this experience was going to be.
So tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to learningmotherhood.co and you can find out all about our programs. You can go to our area on there. It's called the Return to Work series, and click on there and you can register and get access to the community immediately. We have you coming in a couple weeks.
Yes.
And then we have an amazing expert coming in about routines, and she's incredible. And then we just had our sleep expert. So we're just cycle through our experts and bring them into the community. It's recorded, so you'll have access to it after the fact. For a short period of time. And we do it so that we can accommodate everyone's schedule. So you can find us there at learningmotherhood.co. And also we're really active on Instagram at Learning Motherhood.
Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful tips. And I would love to know if there's anything that sticks out for any of you today that you are going to use that Kimberly shared with us. If you're listening to this on another recording, please feel free to join our Facebook community on Facebook, Happy with Baby Community. And until next time, you guys, make sure that you're taking care of yourselves.